I have been married to my wife, Sarah, for 3 wonderful years. She is not only my life partner but also my best friend. Her loving nature and genuine kindness have made her beloved by everyone who knows her. One sunny morning, as we sat at the breakfast table sipping coffee, Sarah looked at me with a mischievous smile. "You know, our anniversary is coming up next week," she said. I pretended to forget. "Seriously, time really flies, doesn't it?" She gave me a playful tap on the shoulder. "Don't think you can get away with that attitude. I have something special planned, and you'll love it." I raised an eyebrow. "So, what could it be?" She leaned closer, her eyes sparkling. "It's a surprise, but I can promise you it includes a weekend getaway and your favorite chocolate cake." I smiled, unable to hide my excitement. "You're amazing, did you know that?" Sarah laughed, her melodious voice filling the room. "I do my best as the days go by." I couldn't help but feel increasingly curious about her surprise. We exchanged playful banter from time to time, with Sarah dropping hints that only heightened my anticipation. Finally, the day arrived. She blindfolded me and led me carefully to the car. The engine roared to life, and we embarked on a journey filled with laughter, music, and the promise of something incredible. After what seemed like a picturesque ride, the car finally stopped. "Okay, now you can take off the blindfold," she said. I removed the blindfold, and my eyes widened at the breathtaking view of a cozy cabin by a tranquil lake. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden hue over everything. "Sarah, this is incredible," she smiled, squeezing my hand. "I thought you'd enjoy a weekend for just the 2 of us away from the hustle and bustle." We spent the weekend strolling hand in hand along the lake's edge, sharing stories, dreams, and moments of serenity. On our anniversary night, we sat on the porch, gazing at the stars shining above. Sarah handed me a plate, and there was my favorite chocolate cake. "Happy anniversary," she said softly. "Thank you for making this so special," I replied, cutting a slice of cake and savoring its rich flavor. "I love you," she said, her eyes fixed on mine. "I love you too, more than words can express." As we stood there beneath the vast sky, I realized how lucky I was to have Sarah as my partner. Her warmth, passion, and consideration had filled my life with immeasurable joy, and as the stars continued to shine, I knew that our love story would be forever written with happiness, laughter, and cherished moments. We shared many mutual friends. About 4 years ago, one of these friends announced that they would be moving abroad to work in Italy. Strangely, my wife, Sarah, seemed deeply affected by this news. It surprised me because I didn't know they were particularly close. I remember the day when John told everyone about his plans. We were all gathered in a small cafe, sipping coffee. John had a bittersweet smile as he shared his exciting opportunity. I looked at Sarah, expecting her to react like the rest of us, surprised but supportive. However, her face turned pale, and her eyes seemed to fill with tears. After John finished speaking, Sarah quickly excused herself and went to the restroom. Confused by her reaction, I decided to join her. After a while, I found her in front of the mirror with red-rimmed eyes from crying. "Sarah, are you okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She wiped away the tears and forced a smile. "Yes, I'm fine. It's just that John's departure is affecting me more than I thought." I raised an eyebrow, not entirely convinced. "But why? I mean, I know he's a good friend, but you seem really affected by this." She hesitated for a moment, then looked down at the sink. "It's complicated, and I'd rather not talk about it right now." I respected her wish, thinking that maybe she just needed time to process her emotions. During the following days, I noticed that her mood oscillated between moments of apparent sadness and attempts to act normally. It was as if she was dealing with something beneath the surface. A few weeks later, after the initial shock had worn off, I broached the subject again. We were sitting on our sofa, watching a movie. "Hey, Sarah," I began. "I've been thinking. Why did John's announcement affect you so much? You've been friends, of course, but I didn't realize you were that close." She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding eye contact. "It's really not something I want to talk about. Can we just drop it?" I could sense her discomfort, and I didn't want to push her too hard, so I dropped the subject, assuming she would open up when she was ready. But years passed, and the conversation never resurfaced. It always lingered in the back of my mind. However, that peculiar reaction she had when John announced his departure, I loved Sarah and trusted her completely, but there was a persistent doubt that I couldn't shake. It wasn't until recently, while backing up her phone, that I stumbled upon those suspicious text messages. My heart raced as I read the intimate exchanges between Sarah and John. My hands trembled, and I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness all at once. I confronted her about it, showing her the messages. Her face turned as white as a sheet, and she finally broke down. "I can't deny it anymore," she admitted tearfully. She had had a romantic affair with John during those years he was abroad. "I'm so sorry." The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. The truth I had suspected for years was now laid bare before me. The person I trusted the most had betrayed me in the worst possible way. As tears streamed down her face, all I could think of was how she could have kept this secret for so long and why she had finally admitted it now, 4 years later. She confessed to having a 3-year affair with him. The weight of her confession hit me like a tsunami. It was as if my entire world had been turned upside down, and I struggled to comprehend the enormity of what she had just told me. The trust one had in our relationship had shattered in an instant. After Sarah's tearful confession, silence filled the room. I couldn't find the words to respond. So I just stared at her, a mix of anger, pain, and disbelief distorting my expression. "I never wanted this to happen," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't even explain why it started. It was like a terrible mistake that I kept making over and over again. Why didn't you tell me?" The words finally escaped my lips, carrying a wave of emotions with them. "I was scared," she admitted, tears falling down her face. "I was afraid of losing you, of facing the consequences of my actions. I was foolish and kept telling myself I could fix things and that it would all go away." I shook my head in disbelief, struggling to grasp the magnitude of her deception. "And all this time, you let me believe that everything was fine between us." "I know I was wrong," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "But please, understand that I love you. I never stopped loving you." The pain in her eyes was evident, but it was overshadowed by the pain I felt in my own heart. The image of her with another man, sharing intimate moments that should have been reserved for us, was too much to bear. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil within me. She recounted the details of the affair, the secret meetings, the lies, the stolen moments, admitting that she had fallen into a pattern of deception where the thrill of the forbidden had clouded her judgment. She told me about the bachelorette party photos where she hugged John's bride, playing the role of a friend while carrying this dark secret. As she spoke, a mix of anger, sadness, and confusion swirled within me. I wanted to scream, demand answers, understand how someone I thought I knew so well could have hidden such a significant part of her life. "Why are you telling me this now, finally?" I asked, my voice filled with emotion. She wiped away her tears and looked at me with a mixture of remorse and desperation. "Because I can't live with this lie anymore. I want to be honest with you, even if it means losing you." I sat in silence, absorbing her words. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. The life we had built together, the trust that had once been unbreakable, now felt like a fragile illusion. As I looked at her, a million thoughts raced through my mind. Could I forgive her? Could we rebuild what was broken? The road ahead seemed overwhelmingly challenging, but one thing was clear: the foundations of our relationship had been irreversibly altered, and the path forward was uncertain at best. Unfortunately, I married her before discovering the truth, as she had been pressuring me to marry her throughout this romance. Finding out all of this has left me devastated. Even though it all happened so long ago, I find it incredibly difficult to fathom the extent, duration, and audacity of both their actions. As the weight of her confession settled in, I felt a swirling mix of emotions within me. The love I once felt for Sarah was now mingled with anger, betrayal, and a profound sense of pain. The life we had built together felt like a lie, and I struggled to reconcile the woman sitting in front of me with the person I thought I knew. "Why did you pressure me to marry you if this was happening?" My voice was tense, barely concealing the pain in my words. Sarah's eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she looked at me with a mixture of shame and remorse. "I was confused, lost," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought that if we got married, somehow I could bury the guilt and make things right. I know it was a terrible mistake." My hands clenched into fists at my sides as I tried to process her words. The realization that our marriage had been based on a lie, on her desperation to cover up her infidelity, made me feel sick. "Pig," I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Did he feel any remorse while he was still with you and planning a life with his girlfriend?" Sarah's tears fell more intensely now, and she wiped them away with trembling hands. "He told me he also had feelings for you, but he was as lost as I was," she regretted. "Yes," she admitted with a broken voice, "and that's something I'll never forgive myself for." I let this continue despite knowing it was wrong. A heavy silence hung between us, the weight of the truth resonating in the air. I stood up, needing to distance myself from her, from the pain that threatened to consume me. "I need time," I said, my voice breaking. "I need time to think, to process all of this." Sarah reached out a hand toward me, but I stepped back out of her reach. "Please, just give me the chance to make things right, to show you how sorry I am." She looked at me, my heart torn between the love I once felt and the betrayal that now colored every memory. "I don't know if that's possible," I replied, my voice heavy with sadness. "Right now, I don't even know if I can look at you without feeling this overwhelming pain." Tears ran down her face, and she nodded, her shoulders trembling. "I understand. I'll give you the space you need." As I walked away, leaving her sitting there, I felt a mix of emotions running through me: anger, pain, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. The future I had imagined had shattered, and the path ahead was uncertain. All I knew was that the love and trust we once shared would never be the same again. Story 2. My wife and I met back in college, and we hit it off right away. We were like two peas in a pod, always up for an adventure. After graduation, we tied the knot and started building our dream life together. We even had a little bundle of joy and worked hard to be able to give her the best things in life. Fast forward a few years, and things are going well for us. We have a beautiful home, great friends, and we both have amazing jobs. It's a picture-perfect life. On top of that, according to our daughter's teacher, she has a natural talent for the piano. The decision to foster her love of music was easy, so we looked into hiring an after-school piano instructor for her. One of my neighbors recommended a guy that he used to teach his son how to play the guitar, so we hired him. He's a young man, a recent graduate from music school, just looking for a way to pay his bills. I actually kind of liked him. He seemed like a nice guy. My wife only worked part-time, so she was home during the lessons. A lot of the time, he came by every Monday and Wednesday to teach her. By the time I got in, he was usually wrapping things up and getting ready to leave. After a few weeks of him working for us, I started noticing some changes in my wife. She became distant, her smile seemed forced, and something just felt off. At first, I figured it was work stress messing with my head, but when it continued, I started to worry. The first real clue about something going on came when I saw her get a text message from the piano instructor. She quickly picked her phone up, tilted it away from me while she read it, and walked out of the room. That didn't seem like a good sign at all. Instead of jumping to conclusions and accusing her of something, I turned into a bit of a detective. I needed to see how she interacted with him, so I started coming home earlier in the day. I started picking up on some shady vibes, long conversations that seemed a little too cozy, and a lot of glances at each other. Their body language was more intimate than it should have been. My gut told me that there was something more going on. I needed to gather the evidence to prove it. I bought some tiny security cameras, and when my wife was out grocery shopping, I installed them in some prime places, one in the living room overlooking the piano, one in the kitchen, and one in our bedroom. It didn't take long for them to have been put to good use. At the end of the first week they were installed, I checked the footage. As clear as day, my wife watched the instructor come in and start teaching my daughter for an hour. She then sent her to her room to play, telling her the lesson was over before she led the instructor into the kitchen. They kissed and embraced and did many other things while they thought they were completely alone. That was all I needed to see. Divorce was imminent for us. It was the last thing I wanted, but I couldn't accept that behavior and pretend like nothing happened. I was hurt, angry, and confused by her actions. Maybe I shouldn't have done the next part, but I needed to get some kind of revenge on her. We had a dinner planned with some of our friends and neighbors. It was going to be a big thing. All of the kids would be next door with a sitter, and we adults were going to have a few drinks and unwind. I thought it was the perfect time to share what I'd found out about my wife. Before the night of the dinner, I made sure to invite our piano instructor. He tried to decline, but I insisted he come. He eventually accepted the invite when he thought he might get a few new clients. During the dinner, while the spirits were high, I stood up and made a toast. I turned to my wife and told her how glad I was to have found out who she really was. I said that being married to her for 20-something more years would have been torture. She looked hurt and confused. Then I explained that I didn't want to be married to a cheater. The room was silent, and she looked at me as if she had no idea what I was talking about. So, I elaborated and told everyone about the affair she had with the piano instructor. I pulled the video up on my phone and held it out for everyone to see. Everyone in the room was shocked and stared at me as if I had two heads. It didn't take long for people to take their leave, and my wife and I were left alone in her house. She asked me how I knew, and I explained it all. She told me that it had just happened and she never meant for it to go as far as it did. Then, she begged me for a second chance. I just told her that I meant what I said and informed her to keep an eye out for divorce papers. The neighbor that recommended the instructor to me called me a few days later and apologized. He'd apparently felt partially responsible for what happened. He told me that he fired him and called a few other people he referred to him and explained the story. He expected that he would lose those jobs too. In an effort to keep things calm and normal for our kid, I'm letting my wife keep the house, though she still has hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments left to make on her own without any spousal support. We have come to an agreement for custody, and we're going to try to be as cordial as possible for our daughter's sake. Opie, it's such a shame that you had to go through this. You hired someone to help your daughter learn a new skill that she enjoyed, and your wife ruined that. She saw an opportunity to betray you, and she took it without hesitation. On top of that, she deprived her own daughter of a proper musical education by spending time with him. You did the right thing by trusting your gut and pursuing information on your own. I doubt she would have confessed her wrongdoings otherwise. I just hope that you and your ex can successfully co-parent your daughter as you're attempting to. I wish you well, and I hope you can move forward and trust another partner again in the future. Story 3. My wife and I, both 39 years old, have been married for 12 years. We met at work, and after developing a solid friendship, we decided to take our relationship further. Once we started dating, we never looked back. Our lives fit together perfectly. She truly felt like the missing puzzle piece in my life. We got married, had 2 kids, bought a house, and adopted a puppy. She ended up resigning so she could stay home with the kids after I got a big promotion that more than made up for the loss of her income. With that promotion came late nights at the office and business trips out of town. She and I both thought that my occasional absence from home was worth it in the long run because we didn't want to be one of the couples that had to hire a nanny to raise our kids. Everything was going great until my wife slipped and fell at a grocery store. Some careless employee didn't put a sign up after they mopped, so she injured herself. The fall was mostly mild, but she was left with some lingering back pain. I did what I could to help her. I didn't mind giving her a back rub when she was sore, and I'd help her whenever possible. As good as I like to think I am with my hands, even I have to admit my massages are nothing compared to a professional's. We ended up searching online for some massage parlors in the area with good reviews. We found one, and she booked her first treatment. I didn't think anything of it. I assumed it would be somewhat like a spa day for her. I thought she would be lying on a table with flute music in the background while someone rubbed oil into her back. But when she came back, I realized it was something different. She had this glow about her that I'd never seen. She told me about how light she felt and how amazing it was. Later that night, we even had sex for the first time since she'd fallen because she wasn't in pain. At first, I almost wanted to send the masseuse a muffin basket or something for helping her. I paid for a 2-month-long service where she was scheduled to get another massage once a week. I was just happy that she wouldn't be in pain anymore. The next session came, and she had the same glow she did when she got home. I asked her about how it was, but she didn't give as many details. She shrugged her shoulders and told me it was about the same. Not gonna lie, I was a little excited, thinking I might get to spend some intimate time with her later that night. When we got in bed, she just rolled right over and went to sleep. I didn't let it bother me, and I did the same. This continued for the next 2 massages. On top of her not sleeping with me for 3 weeks, she'd been growing distant. She hardly wanted to be in a room alone with me. She didn't want to have our date nights, and it felt like every conversation we had was surface level. I was going to be away on a business trip for a week, so I wanted to do something to try and bring us together before I left. One thing I knew she loved was those massages. I was curious about that myself, so I booked us a couple's massage. It was a complete surprise. I didn't even tell her we were going on a date. When we drove there, my wife was shocked to see what I had planned. Looking back, the shock was probably anxiety or fear because I was going to be in the room with her and her lover. But at the time, I trusted her and didn't think she could ever hurt me, so that was the last thing on my mind. The receptionist was friendly with my wife, asking about how her massages had been helping. For the first time, I realized it was a man. That wasn't a red flag right away. I knew that many men worked in the industry. But I was surprised my wife hadn't mentioned that. I know that if the tables were turned and a woman was massaging me once a week, I'd have told her. The masseuse came out a while later to get us and bring us to our room. I'm not an insecure guy, but when I saw him, I was a little paranoid about why my wife hadn't mentioned anything about him. He was very attractive. We walked into the room, and we were getting ready to begin. Another masseuse came in for me, an older woman, and we began. I had never had a professional massage before, so I was pretty into it, but I was trying to pay attention to my wife too. At one point during a massage, I looked over and saw her masseuse sensually running his hands down her back, lingering right above her butt. Red flags were going off as soon as I noticed that her towel was lower than it should have been, and she wasn't complaining at all. I couldn't keep myself from wondering if that was how all of the massages went and if he went even lower when I wasn't there. When everything was done, we went back home. My mom had the kids for the night because I had originally intended on trying to be intimate with my wife, but I was too preoccupied. Afterward, I waited for her to go to sleep before I quietly reached for her phone and went to my office to look through it. I found the messages between her and the masseuse. Notably, they were under a fake name of a woman named Emma. My suspicions were confirmed as I read through. They ended up sleeping together after the second massage, and they continued their affair every time she visited the office. They exchanged some suggestive text messages and pictures. What hurt the most was seeing how easily she was able to pretend like I didn't even exist. There wasn't a single mention of guilt or remorse in any of the messages. I sent myself some screenshots of the messages and started packing my things to leave for my business trip. I would have a week to figure out what I was going to do from there. I left in the morning and pretended like everything was fine while I was away. I thought about all of my options. I refused to stay with someone who cheated on me. I firmly believe that there is no changing a person like that. Divorce was my only option. With the screenshots I grabbed from my wife's phone, I could prove that she had violated our prenuptial agreement, so I knew I would pretty much get everything in the divorce. After some thinking, I decided the best thing for me to do would be to really ham it up and catch her in the act. I knew that would embarrass her and that would give me the grounds to get the masseuse fired. From what I read in their messages, they had been having sex in the room she was supposed to be getting her massages. When I got back, the first day that my wife was scheduled to go in for her treatment, I made my way over. I waved at the receptionist as I casually walked by her. She tried to stop me, but I ignored her. I knew where my wife was and what I was doing. She followed me on the way there, yelling for me to go back to the lobby since the massages are private. I opened the door with the receptionist right behind me and saw my wife on the table with the masseuse on top of her. The receptionist audibly gasped and rushed back to the front desk. My wife was begging me not to cause a scene, but none of it was a surprise to me, so I didn't. I told her right there that we would be getting a divorce, and she pleaded with me to reconsider and think about the kids. I contacted the business owner of the massage parlor and told him about what happened. The masseuse was fired on the spot for sleeping with a client on the property. I called all of the other local places and told them about what happened so they wouldn't hire him either. My soon-to-be ex-wife and I are beginning our divorce proceedings soon. She thinks she'll be awarded the house, cars, and spousal support, but she has a surprise in store. I never told her that I knew about the affair before I caught them. I honestly can't wait to see the look on her face when she realizes it. OP, I'm so sorry this happened to you. You did something nice for your wife, and it ended up opening a window for her to show you her true colors. It's such a shame that she would throw away 12 years and a happy family for a brief affair with the masseuse. From what it sounds like, she is trying to be vindictive in the divorce hearings. I really hope that you are favored when you provide the evidence you have of the affair. I wish you well in the divorce hearings, and I hope you don't let this keep you from being happy in the future. Story 4. Before I met Angel, I was not much of a relationship person. I just loved to have fun and satisfy my needs, and that was it. I was terrified of being in a relationship with the wrong woman, especially after everything that happened between my parents and what my father had told me about women. But when Angel came into my life, she ticked all the boxes, and everything seemed right with her. While we were friends, I didn't see one flaw with Angel. I guess it was because I fell in love with her sooner than I imagined, or I was blinded by love. After a few months of being friends, I asked Angel out, and she said yes. We were already so close at this point, and we were inseparable. Her parents knew we were a thing even when we were not officially dating, and they were only waiting for Angel to break the news to them. When she finally did, they were so happy, and I was even invited for dinner to celebrate our relationship. A year and 6 months after Angel and I dated, I popped the question, and she said yes. I was confident she was the one for me, and I didn't think of spending my life with anyone else. After we married, I rented a bigger apartment, and we moved in together like a couple. I didn't want children because I had seen how so many couples had changed after their first child. Except for being with my father as I grew up, no one else made me as happy as Angel did. We did everything together, and we spent a lot of time with each other. The only time we were not alone was when we were having dinner with my dad, her parents, or our best friends. Meanwhile, my dad gradually accepted Angel after I persuaded him to at least give her a chance, and it worked. On the other hand, our friendship bonds grew stronger. My best friend and I still hung out regularly. I didn't want to be the kind of friend who would abandon his best friend just because I was married, and I tried as much as possible to make time for him. I believed it was good since he and Angel got along well, and I didn't think it would be a problem. One day, throughout the 4 years of our marriage, it was bliss, love, respect, and intimacy. We didn't lack anything, and we were always happy. Both of us played roles in our marriage. I would not have believed it if anyone had told me that my Angel was having an affair behind my back. Well, I saw things for myself, and that's when I realized that she had been playing me all along. One evening after Angel and I had dinner and got intimate, she went to bed early because she had been complaining of tiredness the whole evening. I didn't join her in bed because I wanted to watch her murder mystery program, which I always watched every night. Later that night, I went to bed, but I was struggling with sleep, and I didn't want to go to the living room to get my phone. If not, I would surf the internet until 3 or 4 in the morning. I left my phone in the living room every night to discipline myself. After I struggled for minutes, I decided to watch a couple of YouTube videos on Angel's phone. In the middle of the second video, I watched a WhatsApp message popped up on her screen from Rick, my best friend. I didn't know it was Rick initially because she saved his number as R and a love emoji. He must have seen her online and thought she was the one. Out of curiosity, I opened the message, and it appeared like they were only chatting for the first time that day. Their previous messages were cleared, and I felt that was odd. Just as I was trying to wrap my head around what was happening, Rick sent her a photo, the kind of photo you could only view once. When I opened it, it was a picture of his private part, and the picture also said, "Think about this until we meet again." I knew what was happening at that point, but I believed I was either dreaming or having a nightmare. It turned out that Angel and Rick were having an affair this whole time, and I didn't have the slightest idea. We always hung out as a group, and I thought their kindness to each other was because we were all like family. To show my shock, I went to the bathroom and washed my face to be sure of what I had seen, but everything was 100% real. That night, I had several ideas running through my head. I wanted to silently hurt my wife for what she had done, but I didn't plan on spending the rest of my life in prison because of a cheating woman. So, I thought of something, and an idea popped. I continued to chat with Rick like I was my wife, and I asked if he would love us to hang out and eat at a particular restaurant the next day at a particular time, and he agreed. I even asked him to wear something provocative for me, and he assured me that he would wear something that would set Angel's body on fire. He thought he was chatting with Angel and didn't know it was me. As usual, at the end of the conversation, he reminded Angel to clear the chat so I would not see it, and I did. The following day, when I woke up, I acted like everything was fine, and I told Angel I wanted to have dinner with her family later that evening. So, she phoned her parents and notified them about the dinner later that evening. Me, Angel, and her parents were there 10 minutes earlier than the time I told Rick, and our foods were not even served when Rick arrived. Well, let's say he was shocked to see me and Angel's family, and Angel was surprised to see him there. I still pretended everything was good and asked him to join us. I waited for the food to be served, and just as we started eating, I asked questions that made Rick and Angel uncomfortable. I knew they would play innocent, so I stopped beating around the bush and exposed everything they had been doing to Angel's parents. Rick couldn't say a word and couldn't even look me in the eye, he just left. As for Angel, she looked like a panda because her mascara melted due to her tears and gave her a hideous look. She cried and begged and even blamed Rick for manipulating her there and then. I told her it was over between us, and she could only come to take her stuff from my house. Then I left. She made a scene by crying and running after me at the restaurant, but I was not falling for any of that. I knew her parents would try to come and beg me, and when they did, I respectfully asked them to leave my house. When they refused, I kicked them out. Angel refused to come and take her stuff because she believed her parents could beg me to forgive her, so they ended up going with her stuff that day. We eventually divorced, and I cut ties with her and my best friend, including her family. I heard that her father stopped speaking to her and refused for her to move into their house while we were going through our divorce. I also blocked their lines from calling me, and I blocked Angel and Rick on all our mutual social media platforms. I hate to admit that my dad was right about women, but he felt terrible that I had to hurt that way. We divorced in 2020, and it's been almost 3 years now. I still detest her for wasting 6 years of my life, and I hope she gets dumped by every man she loves in all her life. Right now, I'm focusing more on what makes me happy and spending more time with my dad. I still wish I never met her. OP, your ex-wife and best friend are both terrible people, and it would have been better if you never met them. I'm sorry you had to endure this kind of hurt. No one deserves to be betrayed this way. I'm glad you did the right thing by cutting ties with both of them. I'm glad you're doing what you love and spending time with your father. That's all that matters for now. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Story 5. My wife and I both met at a bar on a Monday morning. I worked as a bartender, and she came in that morning after she had been fired from a place she worked for a short period. I didn't know that spending the rest of the night with her would lead to something more intense between us. Later that night, we went to a concert and then decided to walk around town because I was interested in her. She was excellent company, and we discussed the random things adults discussed. After walking for an hour, we went our separate ways, but she was kind enough to give me her contact. We talked the next morning, and a few days later, we met at a coffee shop. I had invited her to come to the bar and spend time with me, but she insisted that she wasn't ready to show her face there for the time being, and I respected her decision. We had more dates after our first coffee date, and meeting her frequently created a chemistry between us. I realized I liked her, and I wasn't someone who liked to beat around the bush, so I told her I liked her, and she suggested that we take things slow. Weeks after we met, I got a response from one of the dream companies I had applied to and got a job. I was delighted because I had not gotten the job I wanted after being laid off from my former company. The only problem was the job was in a different town, and I would have to travel back to my hometown if I needed to do something important. Eventually, I took the job, and as I traveled, my ex-wife and I were not a thing yet. We were just close friends, and I knew she liked me too. We were taking things slowly, as she suggested, and we spoke to each other every night before bed. I think 2 months after I traveled for work, my ex-wife broke the news that she had gotten a new job, and we were both so happy. Although the pay was not as good as her previous job, it was better than the hourly menial job she did, and she believed she could get promoted fast if she did a great job. Sadly, I could not return to celebrate with her that weekend because I was working overtime, but I promised to make it up to her. Not long after that, she started giving me signals that she wanted a stronger relationship between us, and I was forced to ask her out again, and this time she said yes. When she finally said yes, I returned home to celebrate with her, and we made intense love that night. It was our first time bonding with each other, and I still have bits of the memories in my head. Because of our different work locations, our relationship became a long-distance one. We spoke to each other every day and night, sent pictures, and even got intimate on the phone. I also sent flowers and chocolates to her workplace whenever I wanted to surprise her, and most times I would send her money to buy whatever she wanted. Aside from being a beautiful soul, one of the reasons I loved my wife was because she was a giver too. My gifting was not one-sided because she would occasionally send gifts to my house or have something I loved delivered to me at work. While we dated, we didn't have any issues, and I tried as much as possible to travel back to my hometown every weekend, or she would come over. We were very happy, and we loved each other so much. Both our families knew we were dating, and they loved us both. We both got decent pay, and we were able to support our families. Even with our long-distance relationship, I didn't really feel her absence because we did video calls all the time. After 9 months of traveling miles to see each other, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. Eventually, we married, but I couldn't return to her hometown, and she couldn't come to me either. I was working on getting a transfer since it wasn't possible on her end, but things did not move as fast as I wanted. Sadly, we spent the first year of our marriage traveling back and forth to be with each other, and we jumped on the slightest holiday to spend time with each other. After the first year of not getting a positive response from the organization I worked for, my ex-wife and I lost hope of getting the transfer. I even started sending my application to companies that needed my skill in her hometown, and I was hoping something would pop up for me. 2 months later, something popped up, but it wasn't in my hometown. The organization I worked for approved my transfer, and I was getting a raise. When I got the news, at first I was so happy, and I wanted to tell my wife about it. But on second thought, I wanted to see how she would react when she saw me, so I kept it to myself. After everything was settled at my organization, I left on a Thursday. My intention was to go to my wife's office and surprise her in person, which I did. On getting to her place of work, I drove to the parking lot, stepped out of my car, and was about to call her when something caught my eye. There weren't a lot of cars parked in that area of the parking lot, so it was easy to see my wife's car. As funny as it sounds, I ended up being the surprised one because I saw my wife and her boss in the front seat making out with each other. I knew it was terrible when my legs felt numb, and I could no longer move. My heart almost stopped beating, and I was devastated. It was a scene that destroyed every bit of happiness and excitement in me, and I could not believe she was cheating on me after all the promises we made to each other. For once, I never thought of cheating on my wife or being with another woman. I won't say I was not tempted, I was, but I couldn't give in to the temptation because of how much I loved her. Without overthinking, I made a video, took pictures of my wife and her boss, and drove out of the parking lot. I returned to our house, the one I rented after we got married, and she was so happy when she returned home to see me. She even asked why I didn't tell her I was coming home on a weekday so she could prepare something special. I played along, but deep down, I was hurting, and the way I looked at her changed after what I saw. We didn't even get intimate that night because I claimed I was tired and needed to rest. I gave her the same excuse the following day, and immediately she left for work. I sent the pictures and video I had taken the previous day to her HR. Later that day, she called me in a panic and said she had been fired and didn't know why. She lied and acted concerned, asking her to come home immediately. When she did, I broke the news and told her someone had informed me that she was cheating, and I had proof. Her boss was also fired, but she didn't mention it because she knew it would confirm what I had said. She didn't think I was serious until I told her I was divorcing her. Instead of owning up to her mistake, she started calling me names and saying I believed what others said about her instead of believing her. She even claimed someone who hated her must have framed her and she could prove that. I told her I was sorry and kicked her out of the house. She made a scene outside but left after standing there for hours. It made me happy to see her in such a miserable state, but I was still hurt to find out she was having an affair with her boss after all the promises we made to each other. For once, I never thought of cheating on my wife or being with another woman. P.S. Sadly, you didn't even get to enjoy your marriage, and just when things fell into place for you, she ruined everything. I wish you all the best and hope you are able to heal from this.